the quiet watchers. They thought age had dulled her, that the wrinkles on her skin meant the sharpness of her mind had faded too. But Margaret Hill had learned something in her 82 years. The quietest people are often the ones taking notes. The nursing home always smelled faintly of lemon disinfectant and wilted carnations, a cleanliness that was too sterile to be comforting. To outsiders, Rosevale Manor was luxury. Gleaming floors, a chandelier in the lobby, nurses who smiled like politicians. But to Margaret Hill, 82 and still sharp as the day she taught her last class, it was a well-decorated prison. She sat by the window every morning with her tea, a thin film forming over the surface before she drank it. From her chair, she watched everything: who the nurses favored, who they ignored, who cried quietly after billing day. Years of managing teenagers had made her a student of human behavior. Now, the skill returned to her like muscle memory. They thought she was harmless. "Ms. Hill's memory isn't what it used to be," the staff whispered. But she remembered everything: the double charges on her account, the residents who'd been moved to medical care and never returned, the staff who wore new jewelry bought with someone else's pension. Her arthritis made her slow, but her mind was still a scalpel. She had learned that justice, like tea, required steeping. And she wasn't alone. There was Harold, a retired accountant with trembling hands and an unshakable distrust of people who smiled too much. Beatrice, who'd once run a law firm before dementia took her husband and her will to argue. And quiet, timid Nora, who never spoke, but whose eyes flashed when the head nurse turned her back. Margaret started small. Compliments, flattery, a few innocent questions over bingo. Within weeks, the residents were sharing stories: missing funds, coerced signatures, altered wills. The pattern was as clear as her old chalkboard lessons: greed wrapped in false kindness. That night, lying in her narrow bed, she listened to the rhythmic hum of the oxygen machines and the distant, muffled sobs from down the hall. Something in her chest stirred. Not anger, exactly, but something older, colder. The kind of feeling that had no place in heaven. She decided, right then, that she wouldn't die quietly. The next morning, she slipped a note beneath Harold's tray. 3 words written in her delicate cursive: "It's time we teach." Margaret had always believed that order began with structure. Even vengeance, she decided, required a syllabus. She met with Harold first, during what the staff called crafts hour. They sat at a long table surrounded by glue sticks, paper flowers, and a bored attendant scrolling through her phone. From afar, it looked like 2 old friends making collages. Up close, their voices were barely whispers. "I've gone through the accounts," Harold murmured, pretending to cut shapes. "There are irregular transfers every Thursday night. The nurse on duty? Carla, the one with the gold watch." Margaret's scissors paused mid-snip. "And Beatrice? Her legal mind's still in there somewhere," Harold said. "She knows what signatures should look like." By week's end, Margaret's class had expanded. They met in fragments, snippets of conversation during shuffleboard, hushed words exchanged while lining up for medication. Every clue was cataloged in Margaret's notebook, disguised as a crossword puzzle book. She called it the lesson plan. It wasn't only money they discovered missing, it was dignity. Residents forced to sign over small estates for medical coverage. Prescriptions swapped for cheaper substitutes. Even the meals, cheaper ingredients substituted for what families paid for. Every deceit lay like dust on the furniture. No one truly cleaned. Margaret's anger no longer simmered. It crystallized. She'd spent her life teaching children right from wrong. Now, she would teach adults the cost of forgetting. Late one evening, when the halls were still except for the squeak of a janitor's cart, Margaret stood by Beatrice's door. Inside, the once formidable lawyer looked small, swallowed by shadows. "They took my husband's ring," Beatrice whispered. "Said they were cleaning it." Margaret knelt beside her. "Then we'll make them dirty their hands for real." Their plan unfolded like an old chess game, careful, deliberate. Harold would monitor financial activity. Beatrice would review the legal records, and Nora, the silent one, would be their watcher, unnoticed as she shuffled the halls. Each day brought new fuel. Overheard conversations, falsified documents, lies spoken with a smile. And each night, Margaret added a new lesson to her notebook. Lesson 1, power thrives in silence. Lesson 2, manipulation is best returned in kind. When she reached Lesson 10, she smiled faintly. The old principle was back in session. Rebellion, Margaret knew, could never be loud at first. The staff had the keys, the passwords, the access to the outside world. The residents had failing bodies and fading voices, but they had patience. And patience, properly sharpened, could cut glass. It began with small acts of disobedience disguised as forgetfulness. Nora accidentally swapped medication cups before morning rounds, forcing Carla, the head nurse, to stay late filling out incident reports. Harold misplaced his hearing aid, claiming he couldn't hear the staff's instructions, but in truth, he was listening more than ever. Margaret orchestrated it all from her window seat, the same place where her revolution had first been imagined. She watched the chaos bloom slowly, like a vine growing through cracks in a wall. Beatrice requested her old law documents from her family, pretending she wanted to relive memories. Within days, she had copies of her power of attorney, and Harold quietly confirmed that the staff had altered others like it. Together, they drafted letters to residents' relatives, written in their own trembling hands, mailed secretly through the volunteer postman, a kind man who thought the envelopes held birthday notes. Inside those letters lay evidence: unauthorized charges, missing jewelry, signed forms that no one remembered signing, each one a spark in the dark. The staff began to sense something was off. Carla's cheerful tone soured. The manager, Mr. Devlin, prowled the hallways more often, smiling less, demanding more. Residents whispered less openly, but their eyes met across the dining hall with quiet defiance. Margaret's heart raced each night as she reviewed her notes by flashlight. The frailty in her hands no longer frustrated her. It grounded her. This wasn't just revenge anymore. It was reclamation. A lifetime of obedience, politeness, and endurance was turning into a final lesson. No one is too old to fight back. Then came their first victory. One Thursday night, Harold intercepted a call log. The staff had been double billing insurance for extended care on residents who were perfectly fine. The paper trail was undeniable. Margaret nearly cried when she saw the proof. Lesson 11, she whispered, writing it carefully. Justice begins with knowledge. She looked out the window at the moonlight washing over the courtyard. For the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible. The storm she'd waited her whole life to summon was finally forming. Margaret had waited weeks for the perfect moment, a quiet Thursday, just before billing day. Timing, she believed, was everything, in teaching, in life, and especially in justice. The plan had been refined to perfection. Harold had gathered enough financial evidence to sink Rosevale's pristine reputation. Beatrice had drafted an anonymous letter to the state ombudsman, complete with copies of falsified signatures. Nora, ever silent, had taken photographs on her son's old phone, hidden in a hollowed-out tissue box. Margaret's job was to light the fuse. At 9:45 p.m., while the night shift shuffled lazily through their rounds, she pressed the emergency call button in her room. Carla appeared moments later, her perfume thick and sweet, her smile stretched thin. "What is it this time, Ms. Hill? Can't sleep again?" Margaret looked up from her chair, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "No, dear. I was just wondering, when you sleep, it must be exhausting, working 2 jobs. Carla blinked. 2 jobs. "Oh, the one here and the one that involves stealing from the dying." The nurse's face drained of color. Margaret almost pitied her, almost. But before Carla could speak, the intercom crackled alive. Harold's voice, firm and deliberate, filled every hallway. "To all residents, check your bedside drawers. You'll find copies of your billing statements and proof of fraud. We deserve better." The panic was instant. Doors opened. Voices rose. Some residents wept. Others shouted. Carla lunged for Margaret's call button. But Beatrice was faster. She pulled the plug on the main circuit breaker, plunging Rosevale into darkness. Flashlights flickered to life. The smell of fear replaced the usual disinfectant. In the dim hallway, Nora stood at the end, holding up the phone, its camera light glowing like a small, defiant torch. By morning, the authorities were there, boxes of files carried out, questions whispered behind gloves. Margaret sat calmly by her window as the sun rose over the courtyard, casting gold across the chaos she'd orchestrated. Carla was led away first, her hands shaking. Then Mr. Devlin, pale and sputtering about misunderstandings. The residents gathered near the window, watching silently. No one cheered. No one needed to. Margaret opened her notebook and wrote her final lesson. Lesson 12. Revenge is justice with patience. For the first time in decades, she smiled, not as a teacher, but as a victor. A week after the reckoning, Rosevale Manor no longer smelled of disinfectant and carnations. The air carried something softer, coffee brewing, sunlight through open windows, the hum of conversation without fear. For the first time in years, laughter returned to the dining hall. Margaret watched from her favorite window seat, her hands wrapped around a mug of chamomile tea. She could see Harold teaching Nora how to play chess, Beatrice scribbling in a notebook again, her lawyer's instinct alive and sharp. The world, once gray and muted, had color again. But victory came with its shadows. The investigation confirmed everything. Falsified signatures, embezzled funds, stolen valuables. Carla and Devlin were charged. Their photos splashed across the evening news. Families began visiting again, some out of guilt, others out of love renewed. Yet amid the bustle, Margaret felt a stillness inside her that was not peace, but exhaustion. Revenge, she realized, did not return what time had taken. Her husband was still gone. Her youth still faded. The decades of silence, of swallowing pain and pretending weakness, still lingered in her bones. Justice had come late, and though it was satisfying, it was also haunting. That night, she sat by her window as rain began to fall. The rhythmic tapping against the glass reminded her of chalk against the blackboard. She imagined her students again, all those young faces she taught to stand up for what was right. Would they have recognized the woman she had become? Nora joined her quietly, offering half a biscuit. "We did it," Nora said softly. Margaret nodded. "Yes, we did. But don't let it end here. Promise me you'll keep watching, all of you, because power doesn't die. It just changes uniforms." Nora smiled faintly, her eyes shining. "I promise." Later, when everyone had gone to bed, Margaret took out her notebook, the lesson plan. The pages were filled with cramped handwriting, tear stains, and wisdom carved from pain. She tore out the last page and wrote one more line. Lesson 13. Freedom isn't won once. It's kept alive by courage. The next morning, they found her asleep in her chair, the notebook resting on her lap, the faintest smile still on her lips. And though Rosevale Manor would one day change its name and staff, the residents would always remember the whisper that started it all. It's time we teach. Long after Margaret's chair by the window sat empty, the new residents still spoke her name in hushed tones. And sometimes late at night, when halls fell silent, someone would whisper the words that started it all. It's time we teach.